for Kenya. Julius Yego is the first world champion in the javelin.
2024 Paralympic Games, Oksana Masters, the champion again.
The world deals you a hand that you can't reshuffle. These three refuse to let that get in their way.
We didn't have cars, we didn't have roads.
She would cry because her legs hurt so much.
This guy was working in the sand mines when he was a child.
And somehow, they still made it to the top. Starting with this guy who became a world champion by watching YouTube videos. Julius Yego grew up in rural Kenya with no roads or electricity. For fun, he and his friends would throw sticks. They started sharpening and drying these sticks to see who could throw them the farthest. By the time Julius picked up a real javelin in school, he threw it 47 meters. Super impressive for a kid. Problem was, Kenya had no real training or coaches, since they're busy smoking the rest of the world and distance running. So he found a cyber cafe in town to access the internet. From there, he studied the YouTube videos of all the greats, breaking down their techniques and then trying it for himself. But he had to do this all in secret because his dad thought nothing good could come from a computer screen. After years of studying YouTube and training alone, he wins the All Africa Games. Then he gets invited to train with the top javelin coaches in Europe and eventually meets a Finnish coach who saw massive potential. And he was right, because in 2015, he launches a 92.7 meter throw, winning gold at the World Championships and becoming the 6th best to ever do it. A year later, Julius, now known as the YouTube man, becomes the first African to medal at javelin in the Olympics. But this next story makes us rewind to 1986. This girl's doctor said her legs could never work, but now she's the most decorated winter Paralympian in US history. In 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear plant explodes, sending radiation all across Ukraine. Just 3 years later, Oksana Masters is born. 6 toes on each foot, uneven legs, and shins so weak they could barely hold her weight. So her parents leave her at an orphanage, where she faces all kinds of abuse and malnutrition. When she turns 7, she's adopted by an American woman, giving her a chance at a new future. Growing up in America was a big change, but she was still dealing with that unbearable pain in her legs. So at just 13, Oksana decides to amputate both of her legs. Later that year, her gym coach suggests that she tries adaptive rowing. She hated the word adaptive, but was interested in rowing. But when she tries it out, she immediately falls in love, due to it being a physical form of therapy. This is when everything changed. In 2008, she discovers the Paralympics and now has a new goal. Just 2 years later, she shatters the indoor rowing record. Oksana qualifies for the 2012 London Olympics and gets a bronze medal, USA's first in that event. Then the next year, a disaster strikes. A major back injury forces her out of rowing forever. Instead of calling it quits, she decides to adapt and tries out cross-country skiing. 14 months of brutal training later, she qualifies for another Paralympics, winning silver and bronze. An insane achievement, but still not enough for Oksana. It's now 2016. She tries hand cycling and finishes 4th. Still desperate for gold, she has her eyes on the 2018 games. But just 3 weeks before the event, she gets an elbow injury, then crashes out of a biathlon race. But due to the condition of having that in her, Oksana manages to win 2 golds, 2 silvers, and a bronze. Since then, she's competed in 3 more Paralympic Games and won 11 more medals, putting her at 19 medals across 4 sports. Despite her massive setbacks as a kid, Oksana is arguably one of the best US athletes of all time. How does a 10-year-old sand miner from Africa become the heavyweight champion of the world, throw the hardest punch ever recorded, and have the craziest story I've ever heard? Francis Ngannou was born into extreme poverty in Batié, Cameroon. At 10 years old, he's kicked out of school because he can't afford basic supplies. So he has to start shoveling sand in a quarry in order to provide for his family. While he was working, the others noticed something. He was stronger than most grown men, but during his time doing literal child labor, his dad ends up dying because he can't afford healthcare. Devastated, Francis decides he's not gonna let that happen to his mom. That's when he stumbles across this clip.
I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me.
Now he needed to leave Cameroon to make this dream happen, but legal immigration wasn't an option. So he jumps on a beat-up truck with 25 others across the Sahara Desert. The goal was to reach Melilla, a Spanish territory on the Moroccan coast. When he finally gets to the border, he has 2 options: climb a heavily guarded barbed wire fence or face the ocean in an inflatable boat. Francis tries the fence. The wire shreds his hands and feet. He gets caught, deported, and dropped into the Sahara Desert with nothing. But Francis doesn't quit. He comes back to try it again and fails 7 times over the course of a year. so he finally tries the boat method with a few others. The two paddling fall overboard in the rough waters, making Francis row with his bare hands, until a Red Cross boat rescues them. Francis spends 2 months in a Spanish jail for illegally entering Melilla, but once he gets out, he's finally free. He wanted to go to a place with a ton of economic opportunity. Francis walks into a local boxing gym and says he's gonna be a world champion. The coach decides to take him in and let him train for free. Francis spends his days in the gym and the nights sleeping out in the parking lot. Needing money, the coach suggests that Francis starts with MMA. Just 4 months into training, Francis wins his first fight. By 2015, he's in the UFC. He racks up 6 straight wins, all by stoppage. He finally earns a title shot against Stipe Miocic, widely considered the greatest heavyweight ever. But Francis comes up short and is devastated. After one more tough loss, Francis turns it around with 4 straight knockouts, granting him another title shot and probably his last. This time around, he gets revenge on Stipe, claiming the belt and the title of the scariest man on the planet. But the story doesn't end here. In contract negotiations with the UFC, Francis demands better fighter pay and healthcare. The UFC says no. So Francis leaves the UFC, vacates the belt, and calls out boxing heavyweight champion Tyson Fury, with exactly 0 professional boxing fights. Everyone says it's a gimmick and will never happen. But in October 2023, it actually happens. During the fight, he ends up dropping Fury. Even though the judges say he lost, in the eyes of his mom, Cameroon, and his bank account, he was a winner, leaving with a payday bigger than his entire UFC career.